Welcome back to TVC News. Of course, you're watching Journalist Hangout. We talk about the ugly tale of collapsed buildings in Nigeria, especially in Lagos here. This latest case, of course, continued on Monday, where a 21-story building in the Ikoyi area of Lagos caved in, with many people trapped in the rubble. And Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has now ordered an investigation into the collapsed building, which was under construction, while the number of casualties continues to rise, and efforts to rescue other victims are also ongoing. There's so many questions, regarding this particular one in Ikoyi, the highbrow part of Lagos, of course. Okay, so let me come to Cyril. Cyril, what kind of investigation are we talking about?
Well, what the governor said is that, or what the state government has said is that 2 investigations are going to go on at the same time. First is the state government's own internal control mechanisms to find out what might have gone wrong. And number 2, another investigation by an independent panel comprising relevant professional organizations like the architects, builders, and so on. So these 2 will go together, and then we are going to see what comes out of them. Now, as you might already be aware, the governor has ordered the indefinite suspension of the head of the building agency. So this is where we are at the moment. What we also do know was that when the deputy governor went to the scene of the incident, he did confirm that that building had been marked.
It was even sealed.
And shut down for,
right.
Yeah, sealed actually.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to use, for 4 months because of anomalies. I cannot independently verify a letter I saw yesterday in which, dated, I think, for February last year.
2020.
Yes, in which a service provider to the project had actually said that they couldn't
vouch for the
continue with the project because they couldn't vouch for the integrity and authenticity of materials being used, So when you put all of this together, my personal conclusion, first of all, is this: that building collapsed long ago.
That's the truth.
That building collapsed long ago, and without making light of those who have died, the people whose, and may their souls rest in peace, the victims of yesterday's collapse became victims long ago. What we saw yesterday was just a ritual, was just the culmination of perhaps negligence, some kind of negligence, because if indeed within a system a project had been sealed and said this thing is, with the anomalies, we sense foul play here, the materials are inferior, we do not trust whatever is going on here, on whose authority was it now unsealed? And on whose authority did work now resume?
All right, we'll try to make sense of all these issues that are paramount for you. Let me compare your concerns now with that of Sam's. For you, what questions would you be asking now?
Same questions that are already out there in the public. Who gave approval for work to be done? If there was an instruction to seal up the place, who unsealed it? Who authorized work to proceed, even with the government decision to seal up the place? Those for me are critical questions.
Let me even add, Sam. Well, in contrast to what Cyril said, that the building had collapsed, way before it happened. But then we have eyewitnesses on ground yesterday saying it didn't even show any signs of cracking. There were no signs, and it's to the outside eyes.
They wouldn't know, probably because they are not experienced. The structural engineers, again, if we trust that letter that went viral yesterday, as far back as almost 21 months ago, had said, look, we can't continue to be part of this project. And that could have been top secret. So those of them who are operatives, you can call them laborers on site, probably didn't know much of this. And that's why Cyril said, this was a disaster waiting to happen. So the critical question is, if government sealed the place some 4 months ago, how did the owners of the property, what audacity, led to the owners of the property asking workers to return, to site and continue with work? And if he acted on his own, why did the authorities not do the needful? who shut his eyes, okay, to the development. And that is why, one would commend what the governor has done, but that wouldn't be enough. Asking the building control GM to, go on indefinite suspension, you just want one part of it. In fact, the questions, the answers to the questions that need to be asked are just there. And we hope and trust that this investigation wouldn't take, ages. Because it's clear, those who were involved in the project at some point said, no, we don't feel safe, we don't want to be part of this anymore. The man who owned the place decided to turn his back on government orders, okay, and proceed with work. So we expect that the investigations will be carried out and findings made public as soon as possible. And of course, it shouldn't be the kind of stuff that we have had in the past where we had, story buildings, collapsing somewhere in Lagos. Remember the synagogue incident? We don't know what has become of the findings till date. So these are the concerns of Nigerians. Nothing should be swept under. The facts are just there. I still can't make sense of some of the images I've seen. I saw since yesterday. Traumatizing. Seeing people just, it's horrible. It's horrible. And to imagine that, suspicions are that many more persons will be, probably buried under the place. It's a pity, really. And what the government needs to do is ensure that whatever decisions that have been taken in terms of probing the incident should be done very quickly, findings made public, and people punished for the role they played in this disaster.
Femi Oshibono, has been in the news. Of course, the internet is replete with interview after interview talking about the kind of person he is, internationally renowned, for building properties of this magnitude. And sadly, we get to this point that we have to talk about him in this kind of manner. But I really don't know how to craft this question. But for Cyril, for you, what questions would you want to be asking? Okay, we first heard that at a point he was even trapped. He was carrying out inspections with highly reputable people, and we don't even know his whereabouts. There are also reports of him being arrested, and all that. But specifically for you, what do you think went wrong?
No, sir. I think I'd like to ask him if this has been done in the UK. I think is Portugal, South Africa, and so on. So what happened? Why? What made this different? I would like to find that out. I would like to know, is it the Nigerian soil, is it the Nigerian water, is it the Nigerian air? I would like to know, because there is the fear, and it may not be fair to just single out a name, because this sort of this magnitude of, I don't know what to call it now,
disaster
of what you're seeing can't be traced to one person alone. People, because it takes two to tango. You cannot. This is the Nigerian system again that we cry about all the time. When people are sure, or when people have the confidence that they can do things and get away with them. You remember one that happened in Lekki? I think where you have House on the Rock, that road leading down.
Yeah,
yes,
it's about 4-story or 5-story building there.
It was being developed. You saw what happened on Lagos Island. So somehow I think we have a culture of sweeping things. Once the news cycle ends, everything ends. But the fact is that we must continue to ask these questions. It is not a good thing that people are taking advantage of the common social need for shelter. People, because of the population, because of the high end, because of the increasing number of people who are perhaps transiting into the upwardly mobile class, and so housing will continue to remain a need for many. We must get to the root of this. I would like to ask, what really went wrong in this case?
In the words of the Building Collapse Prevention Guild, that will be the MD or so for the Ikoyi Obalende cell, he says something went wrong technically for a building of that scale on the construction to collapse if it wasn't pulled down, or explosives planted, therein for it to have, just come down. Like you said, the videos are really something to describe. But back to the question I asked Cyril about the MD of Foscol Heights. what could have gone wrong if indeed something technical went wrong?
We can only hazard guesses here. We can only hazard guesses. Probably inferior, materials were used in the construction.
And that has also been, circulated.
That allegation had been made. I don't want to sit down here and draw conclusions.
Absolutely.
For a property of that magnitude, some level of professionalism ought to have, attended its development. So there are things that you do, that the experts do, testing the soil, testing the integrity of the work that has been done. The questions to ask, were all this done? The other important question that should also be asked, when the other structural engineer turned down the offer to continue with the project, who else was recruited? How knowledgeable was he? Why did he resolve
go ahead
to work with the property developer, knowing that certain issues have been raised concerning the integrity of the building?
All right. Well, that said, gentlemen, let me introduce our guest for this hour now to help make sense of this burning issues. The president of the Nigerian Institute of Building. He's also the former president of the Building Collapse Prevention Guild. Kunle Awobudu, thank you so much for joining in on Journalist Hangout at this time. Okay, first off, so look at the scenario that played out in that February 2020 circulation, that correspondence between the engineers and MD Foreshore Heights. So what should have happened after an engineer, says he cannot continue? He doesn't believe in the vision of, the owners of a building he was helping to develop, as from fourth floor. Please take it up from there.
Yes. Naturally, one should salute the courage of the engineer, of the MD of that company that wrote the letter. That happened to be prowess, yes. However, you should not stop at just writing a letter to dissociate yourself from such a sensitive project. What's stopping from going further to inform the authority, the concern, or the regulatory bodies that this is a project that I was handling as for structural supervision or as structural engineer. However, there is a disagreement on procedure. So, to maintain our reputation, we are withdrawing. Assuming this letter, we got the acknowledgement letter, copy of that letter, and also it was confirmed by LASCA officials or GF that they received this letter and nothing was done. So we should learn from this experience. When professionals are withdrawing from a project and you notice that the project continues without following due process, then you withdraw the attention of the appropriate authority to sanction the developer. This kind of disaster we are witnessing could have been avoided. So honestly speaking, it has become a belabored matter for those of us who have been committed to this evangelism on prevention of building collapse. We have been on this assignment for a very long time. And the press too could also be advised not to only wait for when a building collapses before you help us hype on the need to observe the regulations, and then
Mr. Obudu, let me also interrupt to also ask that you explain what happens when the government says it sealed a property under construction, and then 4 months after we see, going by the report circulating, that they are back at work. At what point does the government, or what conditions must be satisfied before the government okays resumption of construction activities? And can that be bypassed? How can you really go back without the government's knowledge or permission now to continue working? Help us in that regard too.
May I let you know that Ikoyi is the eyebrow, #1 eyebrow location we have in Nigeria. So any development in that area, in fact, any lifestyle official in that area is always cautious. Developers and landlords in that area are very, very influential. Political influence is a problem some of these lifestyle officials have been facing. We were aware of this. It is people like us that can talk on this issue. But you know, government officials will not complain. What I also learned was that the guy claimed to be influential. But if we can leave these officials to execute this assignment without interference, it is good for our profession. But nonetheless, an action has been taken by the governor now by suspending the GM, where he who wears the crown must be ready to take responsibility. Good. Okay. We have had such a situation in the past. During Governor Ambode's tenure, when Lekki Garden collapsed, that was March 8, 2016. The officers in charge of that area were dismissed.
Mr. Kule Awobudu, I'm afraid I have to interrupt you. We've run out of time and we have more ground to cover. We were speaking with the president of the Nigerian Institute of Building, Kule Awobudu. Thank you very much for your contributions on the program. Let's